We always love talking on this show to athletes who are very good at one sport. But what about an athlete who is very good at two sports? And that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. Erin Aldrich-Shean competed at an international level in both high jump and volleyball, representing the US at the Sydney 2000 Olympics in high jump, and then also representing the US in volleyball, where she actually went to the Pan Am Games and won a bronze medal back in 2003. And a plenty big career that we're going to talk about, all the achievements that she made, and I'm so excited to welcome her to the show right now. Erin, welcome to Off the Podium.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me here.
It's exciting to chat to you because I always get excited to learn about how one athlete can get so good at one sport, let alone two. I mean, it's an incredible story career that you've been able to do that. And we always like to touch on sort of when people get into the sports. Often kids play lots of different sports when they're growing up. It seems like you just probably did the same, Erin, I'm guessing, and just couldn't pick between the two. Is that how it worked? How you ended up becoming so good at two different sports?
You know, I think it probably overwhelmed my parents when I was registered for like 8 sports at one time. I just loved being active and I loved sports. And I am even today just a huge advocate of multi-sport athletes. I just feel like there are so many great things to learn about playing more than one sport or multiple sports. And so, yeah, I mean, I just absolutely love sports in general and didn't find my final 2 sports that I went professionally in until they were probably the last 2 sports that I picked up.
Wow. Started
in gymnastics, which, you know, you can't see my height, but we know that a 6'1", or actually 1.85 meter human being should probably not be a gymnast, particularly as a woman being that tall. But yeah, I started out in gymnastics and it was really great for body awareness. And there are always these things that different sports can teach us. And so then went on to softball, basketball, tennis. I played tennis very competitively for years and actually could have played in college at a smaller school than what I went to college playing in volleyball and track. But yeah, I tried every sport and loved them all. So it was very hard to narrow it down.
Well, I'm glad you went through some of those ones because I was going to ask you what were the 8 sports. But we're advocates for multi-sport athletes on this one because we're big fans of things like modern pentathlon, Nordic combined, decathlon, heptathlon, like these sports where athletes have to do many disciplines. So I like how you sort of thought outside the square there and didn't just go, I want to be a modern pentathlete or one of these ones. You went sports that were so diverse that I don't even think we could create a sport to combine all of them.
Yeah, I mean, it was, there are some really good synergies between the two. I was a middle blocker on the volleyball court, and I'm not sure how popular volleyball is there in Australia, but it's an extremely popular sport here, particularly for women, even men. And then the beach is very popular as well. So yeah, I was a middle blocker, and if anyone knows kind of what that position looks like, we're in the middle of the court and we can run what we call a slide behind the setter. And that play is off of one foot, and it's very similar the way that it looks to the takeoff of a high jumper. So I think that's why I was able to, naturally succeed at both. Was I was able to convert speed to height off of one foot in an unusual way. It's what led to success as a high jumper, and it just felt really natural to me. So why not do 2 sports?
Well, when you came to choosing those 2 late, as you mentioned, were you doing volleyball first and then do you get poached into high jump, or is it the other way around?
Yeah, so the way that it works here in the United States is, soccer was another sport that I played pretty competitively early on. And you go through these phases of trying new sports. And I feel like the younger kids start with like soccer and baseball or softball, if that's a girl. And, maybe golf or tennis. And then you get into junior high here, which starts in like the 7th grade. And you get put through this schedule of sports. So it would be like volleyball is in the fall, and then right after volleyball, you go into basketball, and then you go from basketball into track. So those are kind of the three main sports. And then, soccer, I think, is maybe the third two that would conflict with track. So you probably would have to maybe choose between soccer and track. There are some sports that conflict with others. But when I got into junior high, I just started with that whole rolling sports schedule and started on the volleyball court, and then, went into basketball. And of course I was tall, so made the basketball team. And then
could jump.
We went to track. Yeah, could jump, could do layups all day long. So that's another play on the basketball court that is very similar to the takeoff of a slide or the high jump. And so I was just always really good off of 1 foot, and went into track season after basketball, and they immediately were like, okay, you over there, go to the high jump pit, because I was tall.
Wow. That's simple.
Right. It's that simple. I mean, higher center of gravity, and head over to the high jump pit, because you have a better chance of jumping high, even if you can't jump.
Not they didn't think put a pole in your hand, pole vault, that also might help, or
yeah. I mean, unfortunately, pole vault requires some upper body strength, and I don't know that I really was built for that. So I had a fast arm because, unbeknownst to most people, volleyball players don't really necessarily need to be strong in their upper body. You just have to have a quick arm. The faster you can swing your arm, the harder you can hit. So yeah, it just worked. It worked for me to do that schedule of events.
It's crazy to think that basically somebody telling you, oh, go to the high jump, essentially leads you to become an Olympian in one way, Erin. It's sort of like one simple decision like that on that day, you should do high jump, you're tall. And then all of a sudden you're standing there in a stadium in Australia, however many years later, being an Olympian. It's crazy that one moment sets you on that path.
Yeah, it is totally interesting. I will say that, again, I've told you about how natural the 1 foot takeoff was for me. And when I was little, so first of all, rewind, and I told my parents that I was going to be an Olympian when I was 6. That's how into sports I was. So it all started kind of there of like, okay, I do want to do this, because I was watching the 1984 Olympics on television and just was in awe and enamored with those athletes and just this big production, right? And so I just thought I have to do that. And I was obsessed with sports. So I didn't know what sport it was going to be at the time, or what sports. But I just knew that I wanted to be on that path. And so it was, I was a little kid. I grew up in a really long house. So my parents had this long 1-story house. And in order to get from one side to the other, I ran it every time. And, there were ottomans along the way, and I was hurdling the ottomans, and I was touching the door jambs. And so it was like all this practice off of like 1 foot that I didn't really even realize I was getting comfortable with it. And it was just a natural thing for me. So when they told me to go over to the high jump pit, I was like, well, this is super comfortable. They showed me what it was like to high jump, like a video or something, and I just replicated it and got on the start mark. And I think my first year I jumped 5'6". So that would be what? I'm not very good at my metric when it goes that low. I normally start at like
Look,
1
as
meter
somebody
80.
who doesn't really work the other way around, I'll say that was a good start.
So 1 meter 80. So what? Every 2 inches is 5 centimeters, I think. So 75, 70, 65 or something. So I think I may have jumped like 165 my 7th grade year. And then, which was 13. And then when I was 14, I jumped 170, and then 75, and then 80 by the time I was a freshman or a sophomore. So let's say 16, and then 85 by 17, 90 by 18. So I jumped 1 meter 90 when I was 18.
Wow.
And 93 or 95 when I was 19. So
the progression kept going.
The progression was just a consistent incline at that time.
Incredible. Just want to backtrack. You're saying you're watching the Olympics when you were 6 at LA, of course, 84. Now, obviously, the Olympics in any year is a big thing when they're on TV and that. But I mean, 84, Los Angeles. I'm sure not only were you, but everybody was captivated by that. And that's a very groundbreaking Olympics, how that also changed the Olympics moving forward. We saw it here in Australia. You competed at Sydney, but I was 13 when Sydney was on. So I saw how that captivated Australia and how everybody got involved in that. But did that sort of help that sense of, I'm sure, US pride that was taking over the country in those very groundbreaking Olympics to really kind of give you that Olympic dream in 84?
Yeah, I'm sure it did. And by the way, like, don't even try to do the math on it. Just let's.
Erin, without being disrespectful, I'm actually glad to have somebody who's older than me for once. I'm so sick of getting athletes on this show who are like, oh, my first Olympics was London. I remember watching on TV. I'm like, shut up.
Yeah, I'm like, whenever I tell the story of my first Olympics at 6 being 1984, then people are like, oh, wait a minute. 1977, 78. She was born, and so
it's like the metric, and we don't do the conversions. It's fine.
Yeah, let's not do any conversions anymore. But yeah, I think that the 84 Olympics were just so amazing, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're like right around the corner. Like, they're in our country, and it's pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, I just was totally enamored by the Olympic rings, by anything, red, black, blue, green, yellow. It just was so amazing. And it was like I had like a one-track mind from that point.
Literally, as we almost, well, not really, because of all the different sports. But so when it came to that knowing, then, I mean, all those sports you're mentioning are kind of Olympic sports. So was that almost like a deliberate thing that you kind of, with all those sports, or was it just so happened that every sport? I mean, I guess softball and baseball at the time weren't. Obviously would go on to be. But, I mean, was that kind of a deliberate thing when you chose those sports?
I don't know that it was like deliberate. I just loved being active and loved challenging myself athletically and coordination-wise. Again, super tall, but unusually coordinated for my height, and really fast at a young age, and not fast anymore, comparatively speaking. So everybody caught up to me there. But yeah, I think it was just all the sports that are really popular in America is kind of what I tried out. And I was just looking for something that I would easily excel at, that I could be coachable at. That's how I narrowed it down.
When it comes to the height, you're born tall, and obviously, as you say, there are certain sports straight away that people are like, basketball, like do this, do that. Does it become a bit of an annoyance sometimes when it's kind of you are just almost pigeonholed into the obvious sports? Because we do see often that taller athletes can break through in sports, like you mentioned, gymnastics. Like, we can see it is a possibility. Obviously, it makes it a little bit difficult based on that. But automatically, when people are just like, high jump, you're tall, she'd be like, no, I want to do discus. Like, I mean, leave me alone.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could have maybe thrown the shot again. Like, I don't have
good at throwing,
upper body strength very much, but I did have a high center of gravity, which also helps in the shot put. But yeah, it's very like, you're very much stereotyped. Like you're tall and you're thin. You must be a high jumper, and at that time, I was kind of like, you know what? If that's where my skills are and that's what's going to get me to the Olympics, then fine. Like, put me over in the high jump,
We'll do it.
And it was something that I just really loved doing. And I, of course, loved succeeding at it. And then, the volleyball court, I loved the camaraderie with my teammates. And it's funny because it ended up being that volleyball probably ended up being my favorite sport in my career of the two. It started as a track athlete in the high jump, but really ended up, as I evolved as a person, as a human, I think that the camaraderie with my teammates became really special in a team sport. So, I lived that life of a team and an individual athlete to, at an Olympic level or, close to Olympic level in one, missing the cut. But, it was really special to be able to experience sport at that high of a level in both individual and team. And I just truly loved my teammates. And now you ask me, I used to hate my height in school, particularly because all the boys, I think, looked at me like I was an alien, and I so desperately wanted to go on a date. But then, now that I'm older, I'm like, why couldn't I have gotten a couple extra inches? Because those 2 extra inches or so maybe I would have made an Olympic team on the volleyball court too. So.
Wow. It's one of those weird things, height. It's like when it comes to men and women and stereotypes, just on a side note, why is it that women always seem to find very tall men attractive, but you don't ever hear really of men who women tall? I don't get that. Where's the disparity in that? That's strange.
I married my husband who is taller than me, but I really didn't discriminate. I was so tall that I didn't have the ability to discriminate because I was taller than all men, so most of the time it was little bitty guys that would ask me out on dates. I think they've just found it. I don't know if they were subconsciously trying to increase the height in their gene pool or what the reason was, but short men, smaller men used to love asking me out on dates. And then, so I didn't discriminate, but
good.
I did end up marrying one that was taller.
There you go. You found it. It was possible.
I did. It's on accident though.
Which are you going back to the teammate dynamic versus an individual sport, because again, that is the unique nature of the two sports that you do, that you are, as you're saying, camaraderie, you've got all these teammates, you're playing together, all these sessions, and yet then when you're on the track, it's very much you against everybody else. It's, even your teammates who are there for your college or the US, wherever you're competing, you've still got to beat them. That's something very, very unique. Was there, I guess, sort of when you were going through that period, things was sports psychology a real thing back then that could kind of help you with those dynamics? Did you sort of speak to coaches about kind of getting used to one or the other? Because I imagine with those distinct seasons, you're in a headspace for one and then you've got to transition into the other pretty quickly.
Yeah. We did have sports psychology, and even on the U.S. national team, when we would make, world championship teams or, with USA Volleyball, we had sports psychologists. I don't think that it was utilized as much as it should be, or it was as prevalent as it should have been. I think that sports psychology is so important. And I say that too because of what I do now, which is I coach now. I don't coach on the athletic field, but I coach with mindset and high performance and life coaching. So I think that's such an important piece to life and sport and all of the above. But yeah, I wish I would have spent a little bit more time in the mindset space when I was a professional athlete. I worried far too much about, trying to hit the ball hard or jump high and didn't put enough time into that. But yeah, it's definitely important. And I think it's becoming more and more important today with athletes, particularly because there's so much to get distracted with. So we really have to stay on course.
Which, particularly in high jump, we'll talk a little bit more, I guess, about sort of where we're at with high jump in the world right now. But we had Eleanor Patterson on a year or so ago, and we talked a lot about that psychological element of you versus the bar. Almost just making that bar yours. That I'm going to get over it. Which I think when you look at some of these sports which look so physical, obviously we know there's always a psychological element to all sports. But to me, high jump is one of those ones where you can do all the physical training as much as you need to do. You got the jump right, you've got the technique, you've got the speed and everything. But sometimes it's just you just can't get over that mental ability to get over that bar on that one day. Do you always find yourself you versus the bar mentality throughout your high jump career?
Yeah, there's always a mental component to, really every sport at a high level, but you're right. I mean, I do think that the thing that stands out about high jump and pole vault also are that it's you against the bar, and it gets pretty daunting when the bar gets up to 1.95 m, 2 meters. It's much taller than you are tall. So you're kind of in your head, you're kind of trying to work through like, well, wait a minute, if I'm not even that tall, how do I get my body over a bar that tall? And it just doesn't make sense in your head. And so it's so important to go through the mental exercises to get there. And any high jumper at that level knows that. I imagine that there are so many high jumpers out there that are so physically talented and physically more talented than the ones that are at the Olympics, but you have to have a combination of physical and mental at that level. And one trivia question I always ask is, what are the two events on the track where you always lose? You always end with failure.
High jump and pole vault, right?
The high jump and the pole vault, like unless you decide to, for some reason, to quit early, you always end in a negative space.
It's a great way of looking at it. Never thought about it quite that way before. Yeah. Wow.
It's really interesting. So, there were times I think that I jumped really, really well. And I was just like, you know what? We're good. We're good. Why ruin a good thing? I mean, I won the competition. I don't have to go as high as I can go, like I'm saving. Part of it was like, I can save it for the next meet when it really matters more. But part of it's like, you just kind of want to exit the track on a high note, and you don't get the opportunity to do that hardly ever.
Rare that you ever get to end without crashing out. Which, just on that quickly, what's your take then on what we're seeing a lot nowadays? We saw it at the Olympics, we saw it at the World Championships recently, about how when you've got two people going head to head and they just decide to share it. Now, it's nice, it's friendly, but I'm of the opinion, Erin, like, come on, like, your competitors, keep going, like, don't share it.
Oh my goodness, how did I know that this question was going to come up?
It's on the list, come on.
But I did. So, yeah, I mean, I can kind of see where the athletes are coming from. I think in the women's pole vault, when it happened at the more recent World Championships, I read a little blurb from the U.S. Pole vaulter who said basically like they had been going for a really long time. And particularly in the pole vault, when one wrong move and you land on your head, or it's just like not necessarily like a safe position to be in after a certain point. Your body, you can get the twisties, kind of like Simone Biles did, where it's like, and that's another thing where I'm like, so many people were like, you can't just quit, you're at the Olympics, but I really kind of get where the space that she was in. And in that, like, there's a point where it kind of becomes dangerous, and not as much on the high jump apron necessarily, but I can see it on the in the pole vault, and I can understand it on the balance beam or in the gymnastics arena. Your health and your livelihood is first ultimately. I have a fellow high jumper that jumped back when I jumped, Jamie Nieto. I don't know if you know who he is, but made, a couple, 3 maybe Olympic teams. And he wasn't actually jumping, but he had just finished a jump and he did a back flip on the pit. And this is something that he has done a gazillion times. I don't even know how many times, like you can't count how many times he's done it. Did a back flip, wrong step, and landed on his neck. He's been paralyzed or, handicapped for years now.
Oh.
And it's heartbreaking, So when your body gets to that place where it's like, now is maybe a time to quit. And unfortunately, it happened at the World Championships, but they were probably both like, we have put it all on the track at this point, and we're only getting more tired, and might just be one of those times where we just need to call it. And the high jump one, where it happened the first time around, I just had to put myself in those shoes and think, the Olympics is about coming together, right? All countries coming together and being in one place. I mean, it was amazing when I was in Sydney, knowing that in that Olympic Village, all countries existed at the same time with no fighting, no arguing. Everybody's just happy to be there, and it's just a community for like the only time we get to have that. And so I feel like the Olympics does and should represent that. So when those high jumpers, had the jump off, and they were like, you know what, is it possible? Is it possible for us to both get a gold medal? I don't know. If I was in that spot and I put my life towards trying to win a gold medal, and I had that opportunity and we could come together and it could be like a friendly thing, I don't know that I would have done the same thing.
It's so layered. Like it. I picture it like tennis. Like I don't see Djokovic and Federer at a Wimbledon final playing 5 sets. Like 2019 in the 5th. And God, this is long. Do you just want to share the trophy? I think you get to a point where you've been battling for so long that you want to see, but at the same time, you're right. Like I see it. It's like a camaraderie thing. It's nice. And at the end of the day, you're guaranteed a gold medal. Whereas you might lose it if you keep going. So,
right. I don't know. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I totally hear what you're saying. And I can see both sides. I'm just like, if I had to put myself in that situation, would I really want to chance a gold medal that I had been working for since I was 6? I'm not sure.
Versus guaranteed that you share it.
And to have that moment, that's a really unique moment to share it with someone from another country, which is kind of like, you could argue the Olympics is about that, or you could also argue the Olympics is about whoever's the best wins, So I don't know. I could see both sides, but it was interesting to watch.
It's created history. I mean, they will always go down in history for that moment, and it will be forever shown. In 20 years' time, great sportsmanship moments of the Olympics, and that'll always be shown. So I guess in one way, you maybe transcend history a little bit more by being in that moment.
Maybe, yeah. And I mean, think about it. If you think about it from a financial perspective, totally beyond sportsmanship and all that. You get a lot more for a gold medal, unfortunately, than a silver medal when you're getting sponsorships and notoriety and things after the Olympics.
And you'd always get that question, wouldn't you? Let's be honest. If you were in that situation, Erin, and then you ended up winning the silver, you'd always get that, do you regret not sharing the medal question? You'd get that for the rest of your life.
You would, and I don't really know that I want to answer that question.
Yeah. Stop asking me that question.
I'd rather it go down as a cool moment in history, I guess,
Exactly. Hey, I think we're going more towards a positive column there on that decision. So through that progression, when you're going through both the sports, obviously it ultimately leads to the Sydney Olympics, which we'll touch on in just a moment. But was there a case where high jump became the one that you were more likely to go to the Olympics? I mean, just with the volleyball side of things, how was that selection period of the 90s? How close were you to making an Olympic team with Team USA for volleyball?
So I didn't join the national team until after I made the Olympic team on the track. I didn't even go to compete with USA Volleyball until 2001. And I think that, I was recruited by, every volleyball school, in the country when I was in high school, but I was like a raw talent, I think, in volleyball that hadn't put a whole lot towards it. It was just kind of natural, raw talent. And I think that they knew that. They knew that I would develop a lot in college. But I knew that I had a really strong shot at making an Olympic team in the high jump for USA track and field. I was, I think I tied for 5th my senior year in high school. And I don't know what it ended up being off of misses, if it ended up being lower than that off of misses. But I know that height-wise, I tied for 5th. And so I was kind of right up there at a really young age. And so I thought, I want to make my first Olympic team in a sport that I kind of almost feel like I can taste it right now. 4 more years, and there should be no reason why I'm not jumping more than well enough to make an Olympic team. So that was really kind of my decision on why to go the path of track. Now, if you ask me now, maybe what I should have done, it's tough to know. I think about this often, actually. I really do think that it may have been more difficult to make an Olympic team on the volleyball court than on the track, simply because I had all the control on the track. It's one person. You just have to rely on your ability to perform on that day. And, if you can do that, you make an Olympic team. It's very objective. Whereas the volleyball court is very subjective. And so you have to rely on whether the coach thinks you're good enough, whether you gel with your teammates the right way. There are just so many more pieces to the puzzle to make an Olympic team in a team sport. And I was short. I was the shortest one on the national team in my position.
Wow.
Which seems crazy, right? Because I'm 1.85 m.
You must have been used to that when you turn around and say that you're short on team.
I know, which is why I'm like, why can't I have a couple extra inches, But all the other middle blockers were, 6'3", 1.94 m or so. And so I was just short for my position. And I think I probably paid the price for that when it came to the selection of the actual Olympic team, because we had a coach that was Japanese. His name's Toshi Yoshida. And he really, I think, valued height, right? All these American players that are so tall and can jump so high and hit so hard. So I think he really valued height, and I just wasn't that. And so I had that going against me. So now I look at it and think, well, maybe I should have tried to make an Olympic team first on the volleyball court. And if I didn't make it, try again and again, and then do the track. But I don't know. I mean, it's always a toss-up. I don't know what the right answer was.
I mean, ultimately, you made an Olympics, Erin, so I think that either way, you can take that on board, which I find it fascinating that sort of through that high jump journey. So before ultimately get to Sydney for the Olympics, you did go to Sydney, though, for a World Junior Championships, where you ultimately finished fourth 4 years out from the Olympics. And obviously at that point, you knew Sydney was an Olympic city in 4 years' time. That was an Atlanta Olympic year, but you knew that was Sydney in 4 years. Was that more of a driving factor to kind of motivate you towards that, knowing that 4 years' time, I could be back here at an Olympic Games?
Oh, yeah. I mean, competing in World Junior Championships in 1996 in Sydney was so special, because I was like, this is where it's going to happen in 4 years. And, I'll be damned if I'm not going to, get to that Olympic Games in 4 years in this same city. So Sydney was just on my radar. And, the only disappointing part of that trip was really just that I felt like I should have been in the medals for that one. Just jumping so well. I think I was clean through 190 as an 18-year-old, all I had to do was clear one more bar. And I think I may have missed out on medals through attempts or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it was such a great prep to be able to say, 4 years from now, this is where the actual Olympics are going to be held. So I will have been here and seen the city and all those things, and gave me some good experience at a high level competition as well.
And was that your first time to Australia at that point?
Yeah, first time.
Wow. It's a big trip. Like, I think kind of, a lot of people don't understand just how big of a trip, particularly, 20 or so years ago, when things were even a little bit different with travel. I can imagine it felt a lot longer back then as well.
I mean, it did. I think that was before 9/11. So you just walked right into the airport, but yeah. Which is foreign to even think about now. But yeah, it was, it was a long trip. And if if it wasn't that long, I would have been there multiple times since. It takes a lot of planning to be like, okay, I'm going to go travel for an entire day and then I'll be there. I want to block off a long period of time if I'm going to make that long of a trip.
Yeah. You got to kind of make the most of it. Fast forward 4 years later then. So take us through that moment when you knew you were going to the Olympics, when you were qualified. What was that moment like, knowing that here it is, this 6-year-old Erin dream of going to an Olympics is about to come true?
I mean, I think there's always this moment, particularly in sports, where, it's objective. Like I said, it's in the subjective sports, it's a little, different, because you probably have a good idea that you're going to make it and, you're in the starting lineup and all those things. But in an objective sport like track and field, where you go based off of time or performance, there's always this one little moment. And it's like this second of time where you're like, holy cow, it's happening, and I will never, that's one moment in my life that I will never, ever forget. There are a lot of moments that were pretty special that I've forgotten. But that is one moment that I will never forget. And I remember it like it was yesterday. We're on the track for the finals. I had jumped really well in the prelim. The bar had been set to 1.93 meters, I think. And back on the mark. And I think it was a second attempt at that height that I was like, if I make this bar, I am going to Sydney. I am going to finally realize that dream of being an Olympian. And I mean, it's been going on since I was 6, right? So I'm 21 or 22 at the time. And I just remember like starting that approach and it just all coming together. And the moment that I rounded the corner to take off, that penultimate step to the takeoff. And I think in the high jump, you kind of know before you even take off, if that makes sense, whether it's all coming together. And then that moment of takeoff is like, everything syncs perfectly. You take off and I'm just like, holy cow, this is it. Soared over the bar. And it was like just this sigh of relief, to be honest.
Wow.
Of like, it's such a special moment.
Which I love hearing that, because, we get a lot of athletes on this show who say are in sports where, they'll qualify a quota and then it's still ultimately down to the team to select them closer. A lot of our winter athletes, of course, who are points-based, and they literally don't know till 2 weeks before the Olympics until they're going. So it is kind of that uniqueness of track and field, as you say. We look at other sports, say like swimming and that, where it is time-based or position-based in a trials, where if you clear a time, you finish in the top 2, you're going. So you've got that level. I mean, does that allow you better prep time, do you think, when it comes to that, given that you're not so psychologically thinking, well, I've got the quota, but they might not choose me. I've got to wait like a month, if you know what I mean. It gives you better prep time to enable yourself to get ready for an Olympics versus those other athletes.
Yeah, that's the beauty of track and field. And of course, it doesn't happen like this all the time, because in track, I don't know if it's the same across all countries, but we have 3 spots in each event. But you not only have to make one of those 3 spots, you also have to make the standard. And so if there's at least one person, I think this is the rules now, maybe they've changed it, but I think this is it. If there's one person that's made the A standard, and then no one else has made the A standard, then that one person is going to go, and there's no, they're just going to send one person. But if no one has made the A standard, they'll send a B standard athlete. And so, you kind of know how it's going to all pan out at the Olympic trials. The only time that you don't know is that, like, let's say I finished 3rd in the high jump, but I didn't have the A standard, and somebody that finished ahead of me or behind me has the A standard. I still have like a month or maybe 2, it depends on when the cutoff is, to try to jump that standard. So I'll probably immediately be over to Europe trying to compete in as many meets as I can to get that standard by a certain deadline. And so that's the only time when like being at the Olympic trials isn't, you don't immediately know. But 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you know when you've competed at the trials, whether you're going or not. And it's a really special moment. And it does give you time to continue to prepare during that time leading up to the games, which, you know, for Sydney was later because of the opposite seasons.
Yeah,
right?
in September.
So we had quite a bit of time to prepare, which for me was the death of me. Unfortunately, I didn't need that time to prepare. I had been going for 4 years in college, volleyball, track, with no off season. So I needed to compete as soon after the trials as I could. And I just was totally burnt out and tired, you know.
So you needed them in July, like usual, basically, when the Olympics would be.
I did. I needed to like compete at the trials and go jump at the games. Like that's the way it needed to be for me. But having that time, that extra time was not beneficial for me in particular at all. And I did not have a good showing as a result. We can talk about this all day, but
it's interesting you bring that up because we recently, a couple of months ago, sort of had a bit of a special period there where we talked about the Sydney Olympic bid and kind of because it's 30 years since the bid was announced. And a lot of the discussion around the initial planning was about the fact that we'd have to have it as a later games given our seasons and everything are different and how that would affect the athletes. So I think you're actually the first athlete we've had on the show, Erin, who went to Sydney, who can kind of sort of vouch for that. That was a bit difficult, particularly for the Northern Hemisphere athletes, where that's so different. So it's fascinating to kind of hear that perspective about how that can affect your performance based on a different scheduling.
Yeah, I also think though that I wouldn't go completely off of what I say. I was young. I was one of the younger ones on the U.S. Olympic team, if not the youngest on the track and field team in an individual event. And I know that there were athletes, I think, that were alternates on the relay team or somewhere on the relay team that may have been a year or two younger than me, but I was the youngest when it came to age for an individual event on the track team. Wow. So I was just also immature athletically. I also looked at Sydney as this is my first Olympic Games, but it will not be my last. I'll be in 3 or 4 more of these. So I'm just kind of using this one as a trial run. And the moral of that story is carpe diem, because you never know when you're not going to get another shot. And I can tell you the story of what happened every 4 years after that took away my opportunity to go again. But yeah, I think had I been a little bit more mature athletically, mentally, emotionally, all the things, maybe I was 26 the next time or 30 the next time in the next games, that I would have handled that a little bit differently. And I would have adjusted my training a little bit better leading up to that, just from pure experience. But being a collegiate dual sport athlete does make that, timeline very difficult when it comes to trying to peak at the right time when you've been in season for sure. 8 straight seasons back to back.
Did you allow yourself through all of that when you're in Sydney to soak up the Olympic atmosphere? We always love hearing from athletes about village life, like opening ceremonies, just like, oh, I'm walking around the village and, oh, there's ex-athlete over there that I never get a chance to see in my other events. I mean, as such a young athlete, are you taking those moments when you're at those Olympics to feel those?
Oh, yeah. And I think the thing that makes me the saddest, I guess, and the happiest is that we didn't have social media back then. So good and bad of not having social media back then. We didn't have the ability to kind of memorialize those experiences quite as much as they do now. At the same time, social media can be horrible in so many ways. So, yeah, but I do have so many great memories. I wrote for ESPN. I I journaled for ESPN so that people could understand what village life was like. And I don't even know where those journals are,
we're going to
but
dig
I
those
wrote
up.
them. I know, right? I'm trying to, I really probably do need to try to dig them up, but they would publish the journals because people couldn't get in the village. And so it was like they would rely on what I was saying from the inside. And that was fun. And then, my parents stayed in a condo building called, I think it was called the Toaster, which is like right across from the Sydney Opera House and the bridge.
Fantastic.
So it's like a condo building that, they rented. That's where we stayed, which was like a super short ferry ride over the water to the AT&T house, which was, I think it was like Waterfront Grill or something, where they had the USA house for the athletes and everything. So their location within Sydney was like the most amazing location, and they would look out their window every night.
I'm saying, Aaron, it's an American thing. We're just seeing that with the Women's World Cup. Fox Sports positioned themselves right underneath the Harbour Bridge opposite the Opera House. So Americans know where to scout the locations here in Sydney.
For sure, yeah. I mean, that's an amazing location from what I could see, So, and then we, my brother and I and a buddy of his, we climbed the Sydney Harbour Bridge the night before we left. And that was really cool.
Fantastic. I'd love to hear, like, obviously I don't want to touch on what happened after the Olympics with one of these athletes I'm going to mention, but like, I think Sydney 2000, obviously I have all the memories around Australia, but I remember that bravado and confidence and the expectations on the track and field team from the US. I'm thinking Marion Jones. I'm thinking Michael Johnson. I'm thinking Maurice Green. And like, they were as bigger names in this country as they were with all of our athletes. Like, I mean, what was that like to be part of a team when you've got those people? Because no disrespect to modern track and field teams, I just feel you don't have that swagger and that nature that Team USA used to bring to an Olympics.
I mean, what a team, right?
Yeah.
Or at least what a team as far as notoriety is concerned. I don't know, that era of track and field, particularly like for the sprinters and stuff, was quite a big era with some pretty big names. And I look back on that and I'm like, oh, I got to compete and, be on the team with a lot of those famous track and field athletes. Pretty amazing. I mean, we could talk about the trouble they got themselves into as well, but they were big names.
I mean, I think back to Maurice Green, like, I mean, it's amazing to think now, like, obviously the era of Usain Bolt now is over, and this was pre-Usain Bolt, but like, I mean, before Usain Bolt, Maurice Green was kind of the it man, wasn't he? He was confident, he had swagger, he was just that personality. I used to love Maurice Green. He was one of my favorite athletes as a kid. The
Green Machine. And then, John Drummond was like very outrageous, and and then the gold shoes of Michael Johnson, and then Marion Jones, which makes me sick to have to think about it now. I mean, you hope that these people are clean, but it's unfortunate. Our sport has been so dirty for so long.
Yeah, and it's actually it's interesting looking back in that period. I've got like a whole bunch of like Sydney 2000 books that are released months after, and you've just got pages celebrating her and her achievements, and it's just it doesn't really hold up too well now, does it?
No, it doesn't. It's so unfortunate. That whole group of athletes that were all training together. It's sick. It makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, very, very unfortunate.
But,
I obviously don't want to, we want to move on a little bit just quickly to some of the volleyball stuff before we get to our last questions. But just, I mean, judging on what you're saying in terms of the performance and obviously the different seasons, had you set yourself a goal of, I'm going to get a medal, I'm going to the Olympics, I'm going to win a medal, I'm going to make the final, like, and obviously not making the final and sort of leaving the way you did, I can imagine, not the games that you were looking for?
No, definitely not the games that I was looking for. I expected to perform better. I think I had a goal to get to the final. I think that I was never one in my athletic career to set low goals, but at that time when I made that Olympic team and there was so much going on just athletically, mentally, physically, emotionally with me that I struggled. I struggled to stay focused and in the game through the Olympic Games. And I was just, like I said, I was tired. I was so tired. I had gone through a year prior to that in 99 where I was struggling. It was kind of like what I imagine Simone Biles saying when she has the twisties and just nothing's working. And I remember like not being able to clear a bar the year before. And it was just like a total mental block. And that's how you know it's like so mental, because I couldn't clear. Like, I think 5'10" was like the maximum I could clear, which is my starting height. So 1.80 m is normally where I would come into the competition. And I couldn't even clear a 1.80 m bar. So you just get into these really bad mental states. And I pulled myself out just in time to make the Olympic team, because it was like, I will not miss making this Olympic team. But it was emotionally exhausting to try to get myself there. So when I got there and I made the team, I completely fell apart after jumping over that bar and starting to prepare for the Olympics. So I just wanted to make the final. And that's kind of when I was like, you know what? There'll be more of these. I just need to take this experience in and learn everything that I can learn from being here and trying to power through what I'm going through. And then the next time I'll win a medal. And there was never a next time.
Which, just on that, you touched on it briefly, but sort of the next two cycles, obviously volleyball, I'm assuming, became much more of a thing going to the Pan Ams in 2003. But was the direction from then to stick with high jump towards an Olympics, or was that goal then, was it switch focus to Team USA volleyball and this would be my next Olympics? Sort of what progressed after Sydney?
Yeah, so I thought I would make an Olympic team, or I had hoped I would make an Olympic team in 2004 on the volleyball court. And so I spent that next quadrennial through, training towards Athens on the volleyball, primarily on the volleyball court. And I high jumped a little bit in the off season as well. But I also went and played a season in Italy professionally. That was where you go play professionally to make money. And that's how most volleyball players make a majority of their money, is playing overseas in Europe. So I went overseas to play in Europe, and I high jumped in the off season, and a couple times during my volleyball season, I would like sneak out and go jump an indoor meet in Italy. And so I would get my marks there that would qualify me for other stuff. And then I learned that we got the final roster for Athens, and I didn't make the Olympic team on the volleyball court. So I tried to transition real quickly over to the track. I had, a couple 3 months before the Olympic trials on the track, and I had qualified based on those marks. And, the truth of the story is that I started dating an Italian guy, and he cheated on me. And between the prelim and the final of the Olympic trials is when I found out, and spent the whole day in the finals just kind of a mess. And I ended up being an alternate on the track. So I finished 4th with that little period of training towards the Olympic team. So I kind of think of it as being like a dual sport alternate in 2004. And that is the worst place you could possibly, I would rather not be an alternate at all than to have to be the next position in both sports. So at that time I was like, well, I'm not going to let that happen again. So I'm just going to focus on making the Olympic team on the track one last time in 2008. And then maybe Beijing is my last Olympics. Then I got a very good contract to go play volleyball in Japan in 2007. And I had never been injured before. So I was like, I always jump really well right off of my volleyball season. Right off of my volleyball season are like my highest marks, because I think you're getting all those repetitions off of one leg that are, repetitions that you're not trying to get. They're just kind of naturally happening. And so my power output right after my volleyball season was always incredible. So I thought I'll take this contract. It's really good money. And then I'll make another Olympic team after my track season or after my volleyball season. Probably a week after I turned 30. So this is my birthday's in December. So this was like right at the beginning of the new year in January. 14-15 in the fifth set, which it's 3 out of 5 in volleyball. You play 3 out of 5 sets. We were in the fifth set and you only go to 15. And it was like 14-15 in the fifth set. You have to win by 2. I get a slide. They set me a slide. I hit the ball, come down, knee completely buckles. So it's medial lateral meniscus and total ACL blowout.
Damn.
And so I was like, oh, well, welcome to the 30s. Here I am with a torn ACL and a blown out knee. And you just, that's only a few months before the games. You cannot get a knee completely reconstructed and rebuilt and then expect to go out and make an Olympic team on the track. It's not possible.
Wow. And no motivation from that point in to try and sort of switch it into London. Sort of it was done at that point.
I almost did. I almost did have that, I did have that vision. I think after blowing out my knee in Japan, I started to make that transition of like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Like life goes on past sports and it's not going to last forever. So I need to start preparing for life after sport. And so I started studying for my GMAT. I took the GMAT to get back into school to get my MBA, my master's in business administration. Got into a few MBA programs, ended up choosing to go back to the University of Texas at Austin to get my MBA and spent 2 years in the full-time program there to just go to the next level academically and my education. And then I made the transition into corporate America after that. And ended up officially retiring during that time.
It's so weird to hear those words, officially retiring at like the age of 30 something. Like it's such a weird, for athletes it's common, but you hear that. And I got to say, University of Texas, Longhorns, I've been outside that stadium in Austin. It's absolutely insane. As an Australian university here, you're lucky to get a 200-seat stadium. To see that mammoth arena standing in front of me, I mean, it's just incredible. And go Longhorns.
It's absolutely insane. Hook 'em horns.
Yeah, hook 'em horns.
Yeah, it's a great, it's just such a great environment for sports there. And I had to go back to my alma mater and compete or, go further my education and get ready for the real world. And, spent 10 years in corporate America and then decided, wait a minute, no, really, who am I? And what do I want to be when I grow up? And then recently just made a career pivot again.
Well, I'm going to just touch that before we get into the questions. One thing I just actually really want to touch on now that we're just on college sports really quickly. We've just seen recently, 95,000 people at a volleyball game in Nebraska, was it not? I mean, how does that make you feel considering that you played that sport for a national level, that we're getting that many people to a volleyball game? That was insane.
Insane. So Nebraska was one of the schools I was looking at when I was trying to decide where to go to
Cornhuskers, right?
College. Cornhuskers, yeah. And another huge athletic program. And they have always drawn the biggest volleyball crowds. I mean, people are crazy about the sport there. So why not take the football stadium that is like how many 100,000 people? I don't know how many people can fit in there. And fill it to watch a volleyball game. So they did, something that was totally unprecedented and put a volleyball court in the middle of the football stadium and build the football stadium. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, everyone in here knew about that. It was
world record for a women's sporting event, was it not, as well, I think?
Yeah.
So yeah, just amazing. I can't imagine the nosebleeds would have been very good viewpoints, but at least she was there.
I know, right? I'm like, how could you even see the ball up there? But
they were having fun. That was the main thing. Before we wrap up with sort of these fun get to know you questions, Erin, just what you're doing right now. So you touched on a little bit before. So sort of coaching, consulting. Give us a bit of an update and sort of how do you find this? I mean, this obviously must be very rewarding. Some of the people I'm sure you can actually help.
Yeah. So about a year ago or a little bit more than that, I was selling commercial real estate or leasing commercial real estate. I was in commercial real estate brokerage for a large international company called Colliers International, which I think also exists in Australia. I was, on the supply chain and logistics side of the business. So like large warehouses. So think like Amazon trying to store all that product and then shipping it out to all the end users. And so I was doing that, and I just kind of woke up one day and thought, you know what? I don't know that this is it. And I had not felt that same passion and drive and purpose that I did when I was competing as an athlete. So I knew what it felt like, and it just didn't feel like this was it. So I actually ended up hiring a life coach, and trying to talk through it all with her. And then it dawned on me, I was like, oh my gosh, well, athletes don't try to go to the Olympic Games without a coach. Like every athlete has a coach. Like why are people trying to go through life without a coach? We all need to be coached in some aspect. And it was through working with her that I thought, well, now it's crystal clear. I feel like I need to be coaching others to, as I say, awaken their Olympian within, because we all have it. We all have something that we are at Olympic level inside of us, if you can just tap into what that is. And so I love it. I work with clients to, uncover their purpose and their passion and work with their mindset to develop a stronger mindset and, achieve their goals and optimize themselves, level up. So it's super rewarding. This is the one thing that I've ever done where I've felt like, wow, okay, this feels a lot like I did when I was an athlete, something that's challenging and rewarding and all the things. And so it's been a great journey for sure.
And that's ascensioncoaching.co. Am I correct there in saying that, Erin?
Yep. It's ascensioncoaching.co. It's not .com, it's .co. So it's not a typo.
Which it was a fun story. In organising this interview, I think I clarified that with your manager. I said, just to confirm that is because, I didn't want to make that mistake. So I'm sure you probably get that a lot. So fantastic.
We do.
What a great way to kind of utilize that though, and everything as well. So very interesting transition. Erin, we close out every interview with a set of fun get-to-know style questions. Now, all our listeners know that we get these from a questionnaire that Team Canada gave their athletes ahead of the Rio and Pyeongchang Olympics. Simple, fun, easy questions, no right or wrong answers. There's always a drawing element. If you wish, it's optional. If you are a good drawer and want to, you can send it in to us later and we can put it on social media. So, for example, if you want to draw a picture of yourself, you can. Oh, she's got a notepad. I like this.
I got a notepad already.
Well, I mean, but you by all means doodle. You can draw a picture of yourself. Draw a picture of a Canadian animal, but we can make that an American animal. And what would the coolest Olympic medal look like? So that's your options if you want to doodle around while we're answering these. But again, no pressure, no pressure. But while you're doing that, I like this. This is the first time I think someone's doing it live. We'll start off with, if you could choose any Olympic host city, where would it be?
I could just pick one because there are so many.
Pick multiple. I think we're going to allow that today.
I would love for Sydney to host their games. It was such a great. They did such a fabulous job.
The best ever, as Juan Antonio said, of course.
Best ever. I'm really excited for Paris, although I don't know logistically how it's going to be, but I just love Europe in general. I'd like another one in Barcelona. I've heard Barcelona is really good, and I didn't get to go to that one. So
often comes up as sort of a legacy one that a lot of people will talk about how well that was put together. And I know Madrid have bid, I think, about 4 times since Barcelona and never get it, but I think Barcelona will be a popular choice. Do you think you'll head over to LA in sort of 5 years to check out some of the events?
I do. I do. I mean, it's too close to miss, you know?
Mm.
So yeah, I think I will.
And then back to Australia for Brisbane 2032. You can come and sort of check out city a little bit north of Sydney. Brisbane's a great city as well. So
Yes, I've heard like wonderful things about Brisbane. So yeah,
always invitation.
Definitely have. No,
In your
definitely.
in your spare time, what is the one thing you most like to do?
Hmm. I like to go to the movies. I love the movies.
Good answer.
It's just it's like kind of I have two kids now. They're 5.5, almost 6, and 8.5. And to put it, lightly, they are exhausting. And the movies is like a great place to go to like be able to kind of check out,
Is this movies Erin time, Erin and husband time, or is this bring the kids to see Despicable Me 7 or whatever they're up to now? Like, I mean, or is it a balance?
I would prefer for it to just be Erin time and husband time. But if I need a break and I can't do that, I'm absolutely willing to take my kids just to,
Eat your popcorn, watch the movie. That's enough.
Right.
That's all. That's all
Right.
you need. What is the weirdest instruction a coach ever gave you?
Oh,
Always interesting, this one. I feel like we need some Jeopardy music here right now. This is
I know.
We can come back to it if you like.
Yeah, let's come back to it
We'll
because
come
I'm sure
back to
there's some weird stuff, but I just don't know right now.
We'll come back. Your favorite workout, I guess, was. I mean, if you're still working out, I mean, your favorite workout is/was.
Yeah, so I just recently started training for a triathlon. I started triathlon training last year. And so I would say cycling, I love, and I've developed this love for like swimming.
Mm.
And then I would also say F45, which I feel like you guys know what that is.
Yeah,
because
we have
didn't it
F45.
start- Okay.
I think it might have started here, but no, it's very, very popular here. So, yes, that's Mark Wahlberg started that, did he not? Was that Mr. Marky Mark?
Yes, it was. It
Yeah.
was. You're right.
It was. And then the whole family's got the Wahlburgers chain as well. Like the Wahlbergs are taking over.
Yes. I
We
mean,
don't-
it's become extremely popular here.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Your favorite sandwich is?
Peanut butter.
You can answer it. It's a classic. It's a great one. Crunchy or
I love
smooth?
peanut butter.
Crunchy or smooth?
Smooth, and lots of peanut butter.
Okay,
Lots of
I'm one of these people who I think like it's kind of like cat and dog, right? Like, yeah, you can have a preference, but you can still like the other. But I'm always more of a smooth than a crunchy man. And I feel I get talked down on, so I'm glad that there's more smooth people out there, Erin.
Yes, I think that's accurate.
Yeah,
But I do like nuts. So
Good answer.
Yeah.
Good answer. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I would fly. That's easy.
Yeah.
I would fly because I just think how cool would that be to be able to like, rise up and fly over everything and watch it. I just think it's such a cool feeling.
Pretty fun. And
That's
also,
why I used to like love roller coasters and stuff,
Exactly. Just go crazy. And you're not going to really run into too much stuff unless you're just, running into buildings. Don't do that. The best candy in the world is?
I think this depends on whether I'm in a savory or a sweet mood, because I love things like Sour Patch Kids. If I need like some, if I'm like really wanting something sour.
Yep.
But sweet, I would say like dark chocolate. I love dark chocolate.
Good answer. I like dark chocolate too. Needs more love. I like that.
Yeah.
As a kid, your favorite sports team was?
The Dallas Mavericks.
Dallas Mavericks. Nice. Still follow them? Still on the Mavericks train?
Oh yeah, we still have season tickets to the Mavs.
Great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Nice. I like that. Your favorite sports movie is?
Ooh, Rudy, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yep.
I love the like underdog, the guy that no one ever thought would do it, and just how important those guys are to the team.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there? I always love asking this question then to see if we can work out. Is there a high jump movie or a movie with high jumping in it? A documentary? Like, is there something out there that kind of connects? Because I always like to go the James Bond route. Has James Bond done your sport? And I can't think of James Bond doing high jump, sadly.
No, I think that there have been movies, albeit like real cheesy movies, that have had a high jumper in them, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think there's been hardly any movies about track and field in general, other than like Prefontaine, but which that's
Yeah,
like running,
Chariots of Fire.
Chariots of
Yeah,
Fire, yeah,
yeah, which is
yeah,
interesting because you think like of all the sports, like I mean, that's just your classic Olympic sport. It's track and field. Like there
right.
should be more,
The
shouldn't there?
very first
Yeah.
sport ever, right?
What's the one sport that any human being on this planet can do in some form or another? It's track and field, you
Yeah,
know? So it's,
exactly. We can all run and
yeah,
walk and yeah.
exactly, exactly. So I think that's very interesting that there's not more out there. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I'll go back to this one because actually we'll come back. Have you coached anything on the coach yet? We can scrap it. It doesn't matter.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like everything I was told to do from a coach was something that I could see why they were telling me to do that. Like I could make something of it. And I know that like right after this podcast, I'm gonna hang up and be like, "Oh, it was that," you know.
Send it in. We'll put it up there. I can.
Okay, I'll send it in. But I mean, most of the time, even if it was super crazy, I could be like, "Okay, well, I can see why you're happy."
Send it with your drawing, the picture of yourself. There you
I've
go.
already drawn.
Oh,
drew-
what's this? This is a. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's a horse. I like
horse.
it. Can you? I
And
need you
here,
to. Oh, she's done more here. This is amazing. Pretty good drawings too for our video, but wow. Yeah, I said, oh, look at that. All the rings on that with an LA. Oh, Erin, you need to take a photo of that and we'll share it on our social media. But for our video people watching that right now, those are incredible.
2028. This is for London.
For LA, you mean?
LA, I mean. LA, sorry.
There you go. Beautiful.
LA
Yeah.
2028.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
There you go. Our first time we've ever had someone doing it live. So Erin will take a photo of that and we'll put it on social media. But our video people saw that. Great.
I mean, I'm competitive, right? So
But
used to know
this
me
is a
that.
thing. But this is what I like about that, Erin, because you think everybody on this show would have that being an Olympian. And you are congratulations. You are the very first summer athlete to have ever drawn for us. It's only ever been winter athletes. So congratulations.
Wow. Well, thank you. I take great pride in being the first of anything.
There you go. Now we're going to set the bar high and we're going to get so competitive with all of these. We'll make it compulsory. Rather than me sitting here going like, oh, it's optional. I'll be like, no, it's compulsory. You have to draw on this show.
It's exactly, and it makes it even harder to actually draw something that's legible when you're trying to answer questions at the same time. Trust me, I know.
Hey, look at this. Skilled on many. This is why you're a multi-sport athlete, because you're capable of doing.
Multitasker.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
works that way.
Yeah.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Ooh, Australia is one of them, I think, or I would go back to Italy.
Great
I
answers.
lived there for 4 years and I loved it. I mean, I've considered taking my family back over there, but we've got a couple friends that are considering moving to Australia and I don't blame them. And then I would say Italy. So Italy and Australia.
Well, you got plenty of time, I think. Well, I mean, Italy, you could get there. If you went there soon, there's an Olympics in 2026 in the winter variety. And then you, of course, now got, 9 years before Brisbane. So you could sort of correlate it around Olympics, just be one to travel around. They're just putting ideas out there, Erin. You're welcome. Last question.
Good.
I love this question because you can interpret this however you want. When you were little, what was one thing you always thought?
That I would be an Olympic athlete.
Be an Olympic athlete. I thought you were going to go that way. I like that.
Yeah. And that's the first thing that came to my mind, and it's probably the truth.
I love this answer here. So I'm basing this on a questionnaire that was given to a Canadian track and field athlete by the name of Kimberly Hyacinth, and her answer for this one was one thing she always thought when she was little, that Jafar was the meanest person ever. Obviously an Aladdin fan, so
That's amazing. I mean, is that like Is it the first thing you're supposed to think of? Or
Look, the answers to that one, I had somebody answered that they were always hungry was one thing they always thought when they were little. So again, that's where you can interpret. Like, I like the competitive nature of I wanted to be an Olympian, but again, you could be like, well, I was always hungry when I was a kid, so that's what I always thought. Like, you can answer that however you want.
I think if I think about it a little bit, like the other thing I think is that one thing you think when you're a little kid is that the world is full of good people and that the world is such a great place and everything's happy and wonderful. And then you grow and you learn a little bit too much and you have some experiences. And so, it just makes you want to go back to being a kid.
Yes, good times, wasn't it? When we didn't have to adult.
When you didn't have to adult and you didn't have to worry about world problems.
Yep.
You know?
I agree. We all need to have
Everybody
that mindset.
get along.
Yes,
We all need to get along.
exactly. I feel like we need to start singing "Heal the World" right now or something, Erin. Like, it's just make it a better place for you
and
for me and the entire human race. Wow, this is drawing. We've had singing.
Duet.
Geez, this is the first time I've ever duetted with an Olympian. I mean, what else can we achieve on here, Erin? This is amazing. We touched on the website, but social media, anywhere else people can follow your journey right now. Erin, plug away. Feel free to let people know where they can check you out.
Yeah. Instagram at Ascension Coaching, and then Facebook, I think it's Ascension Coaching 1. LinkedIn, Ascension Coaching. So yeah, I've got I have accounts on all of those. So just search Ascension Coaching, Erin.
Ascension Coaching. And for those watching on the video, you can see it literally above her shoulder there. So that obviously works well. Erin, this has been a lot of fun to go over your journey and everything else with your career. So fascinating to learn and get insights from you. Best of luck with the coaching and everything else. And come down to Australia, bring the family, and we'll take over. We'll commentate the athletics for Brisbane 2032. We'll line up in the Gabba right now and we'll take over for it. How does that sound?
Let's do it. And maybe we can sing a duet.
Hey, we can be the opening ceremony. We can be the opening act.
Oh, are you kidding me? Let's do it.
Done.